James set about providing William of Orange with ammunition. He decreed that Catholics could not only worship, but hold office. He was his father's son. Parliament was not consulted. Catholics became a majority on the Privy Council. Catholics were appointed to the control of royal boroughs. Little was lacking from James's victory. Only the United Societies remained. He set a price on Renwick's head by proclamation. £100, dead or alive. It was clear to Renwick what his God required of him. He would preach in the fields outside Edinburgh. He would even enter the city itself. He would make it easy for the king's men to find him. The authorities entered the house he was staying in. Renwick shot one of them, escaped, but couldn't or wouldn't run. He walked this far to Castle Wynd, where he was captured. He was too important a prize for simple execution. For 2 weeks, the authorities attempted to extract from him a confession that he had never done God's work. This proved impossible. His execution was finally fixed for February 17th, 1688. On the scaffold, Renwick spoke for King Jesus at considerable length. He recited Psalm 103. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. He read from Revelations chapter 19. Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings. And he concluded, Lord, I die in the faith that you will not leave Scotland, but that you will make the blood of your witnesses the seed of your church, and return again and be glorious in our land. And now, Lord, I am ready. Renwick's death made James feel safe. He could ignore the covenant. He was anointed by God, an absolute monarch, unchallenged. And then he did what his brother had failed to do. He secured the future of the Stuart dynasty. On the 10th of June of that year, the king's wife gave birth to a healthy male heir, James Francis Edward. A rhyme began to do the rounds, and James should have listened to it. It was a prophecy. Rockabye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. Down will come baby, cradle and all. The roots of his power as a Catholic king were far from deep. They had grown upon stony, Protestant ground. William of Orange had begun preparing an invasion fleet 2 months before the child was born. The fleet was ready by the first week of October. With sailors and others included, William's force totalled some 70,000. Clearly, he had no intention of doing this twice. The army landed in Devon in the first week of November, and almost at once, James's support began, mysteriously, to wither away, because in the end, Stuart or not, son of the headless king or not, he was a Catholic. On the night of the 9th of December, the Queen and the King's young heir fled to France. James VII and II followed on the 23rd. He hadn't abdicated, but everyone decided to behave as though he had. They decided too that this wasn't an invasion. This would be the Glorious Revolution. They had invited William of Orange. Do come and take a kingdom. Dress military. RSVP. May of 1689, William of Orange and his wife Mary accepted a joint monarchy of England, Scotland and Ireland. A monarchy with strings attached. The Crown could no longer suspend laws, levy taxes, or maintain a standing army in peacetime without Parliament's permission. Here at last was the new world, 50 years after the Covenanters had first asked for it, 50 years after Charles I said no. In England, the Stuarts were kings no longer, with hardly a shot fired. The Glorious Revolution would acquire another adjective, bloodless. But in Scotland, there was blood aplenty. Several northern nobles remained faithful to James. One of these Jacobites was James Graham of Claverhouse.
Claverhouse went north, formed an army, won a decisive victory at Killiecrankie, and died of his wounds on the battlefield. The first Jacobite rebellion died with him, but its body twitched for some time after. It took several months to crush the Jacobite garrison in Edinburgh Castle. But the garrison here held out longest of all, so it was on the Bass Rock that the Stuart dynasty finally lost its grip on power.
At last, there was a kind of peace. The moderate remnants of the Presbyterians reached a compromise with King William. Bishops were abolished, and the Presbyterians resumed control of the Church of Scotland. But they were deceiving themselves. They were the Church of Southern Scotland. Because in the north, loyalty to the older kind of God-anointed king remained in force. The split in the kirk was a split in the country, an unhealed wound. And the Stuarts, of course, were far from dead. They were only in exile, in France, a long swim across the English Channel. A dynastic time bomb. For 50 years, the Covenanters had been almost the only voice that constantly resisted the rule of the Stuarts, stood against absolute monarchy, insisted that the soul of every human weighed the same. We can almost see them as martyrs in the cause of civil liberty. From a distance of several hundred years, the Covenanters seem almost benign. But come closer. The Covenanters knew very little of mercy. They knew nothing at all of moderation. The only government they could ever have approved was the rule of the Presbyterian Kirk with a covenanted king, one nation under God and bound for glory, sermons once a day and twice on Sunday. The freedoms they sought were freedoms for covenanting Presbyterians and no one else at all. Anyone of another faith could, and certainly would, go straight to hell. Once, this was God's country. It's not anymore. Thank God for that. How much did the Covenanters shape the character of Scots today? Go online at bbc.co.uk/Scotland's history and tell us what you think. The Open University has also produced a booklet about Scottish history and an audio walk linked to tonight's programme. If you haven't claimed your free copy yet or want to download the walk, visit the website or call 0845 300 8850.
Stay with us on BBC One Scotland. More news from our Scotland's History season coming up, including a look ahead to next week's programme. And Neil Oliver